Upper-class paranoia often begins with fear of falling, not physically, but socially, financially, symbolically. The person lives with a quiet awareness that status is conditional. What was gained can be lost. Every success feels temporary. Comfort becomes something to defend rather than enjoy. The nervous system stays alert, scanning for threats to position and reputation. Small changes feel dangerous. A missed opportunity, a public mistake, a shift in markets. Any of it could start a descent. This fear reshapes behavior. Risk is avoided even when growth requires it. Joy is muted because relaxation feels irresponsible. The person may appear confident while internally rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Identity becomes fused with rank and recognition. Losing status feels like losing self. This creates constant background anxiety. Others may sense distance or rigidity without knowing why. Paranoia is not about greed, it is about fragility. When worth depends on elevation, stability feels impossible. Healing begins by separating identity from hierarchy. When the self is no longer measured by position, fear of falling loosens. Security becomes internal. Status stops defining survival. Only then can presence replace vigilance, and life feel less like a ledge and more like ground. Upper-class paranoia often expresses itself through suspicion of motives. The person wonders why others approach them. Is it friendship or advantage? Is it care or access? Wealth and status distort relational clarity. Genuine connection becomes difficult to trust. Compliments feel strategic. Kindness feels conditional. This constant questioning erodes intimacy. The person may keep emotional distance as protection. Vulnerability feels risky when intentions feel unclear. Over time, suspicion becomes default. Even neutral interactions are filtered through doubt. This paranoia is exhausting. It isolates while pretending to protect. The nervous system stays guarded, unable to relax into connection. Loneliness grows quietly behind social engagement. The person may attend gatherings yet feel unseen. Relationships feel transactional even when they are not. Healing requires tolerating uncertainty and human motives. Not all connection can be verified as pure. Trust is always a risk. When the person allows selective openness rather than total defense, suspicion softens. Boundaries remain but walls thin. Connection becomes possible again. Paranoia fades when relationships are chosen for resonance rather than reassurance. Trust grows slowly, imperfectly, but enough to ease the constant scanning for hidden agendas. Upper-class paranoia is fueled by pressure to perform stability at all times. The person feels responsible for appearing unshaken, successful, and composed. Struggle must be hidden. Fear must be managed privately. Admitting uncertainty feels dangerous because it threatens. This performance creates internal fracture. The outer life looks secure while the inner life strains under silence. Anxiety has nowhere to go. The nervous system stays activated because authenticity feels unsafe. The person may dismiss their own distress, believing they have no right to feel afraid. This creates shame layered on fear. Performance replaces honesty. Relationships remain polished, but shallow. Support is avoided because it risks exposure. Over time, the performance becomes exhausting. The person feels trapped by their own image. Paranoia grows because any crack could reveal the truth. Healing involves allowing imperfection to exist without catastrophe. Stability does not require constant proof. When vulnerability is shared selectively, pressure eases. The body relaxes when it no longer has to act safe. True stability is felt, not displayed. When performance ends, paranoia loses one of its strongest fuels, and the person can finally breathe without fear of collapse. Upper-class paranoia often includes fear of envy, a quiet belief that others resent what one has. The person may feel watched, judged, or silently wished against. Success becomes something to guard rather than celebrate. Compliments feel loaded, praise feels thin. This fear reshapes interactions. The person may downplay achievements or exaggerate hardship to appear less threatening. Joy is muted to avoid standing out. The nervous system remains alert, scanning for signs of resentment. Even neutral expressions are interpreted as hostility. This paranoia isolates because it assumes antagonism where curiosity or admiration may exist. Over time, the person becomes guarded and self-conscious. Envy is experienced as danger rather than emotion. Healing requires recognizing that envy is a human response, not always an attack. Most envy carries longing, not malice. When the person stops personalizing imagined resentment, fear softens. Boundaries can exist without suspicion. Celebration becomes possible again. Wealth does not require invisibility. When success is held without apology or defense, paranoia loosens. Safety grows as perception widens beyond imagined threats. Upper-class paranoia often manifests as hypervigilance around loss. The person constantly monitors finances, reputation, health, and relationships for signs of decline. Nothing feels stable enough to trust. Even abundance feels temporary. The nervous system treats security as fragile. This creates a constant, low-level panic. Decisions are made cautiously. Pleasure feels dangerous because it distracts from monitoring. The person may appear disciplined while internally exhausted. Rest feels irresponsible. Loss is anticipated before it happens. This vigilance narrows life. The present moment is sacrificed to preparation. Ironically, hypervigilance increases anxiety rather than preventing harm. Healing involves retraining the nervous system to tolerate safety. Not all threat requires response. When monitoring softens, energy returns. Wealth can provide buffers, but peace requires trust and resilience. Loss is possible, but survival is not as fragile as fear suggests. When the person learns they can endure change, vigilance aesis, presence becomes possible. Life expands beyond constant defense. Upper-class paranoia often leads to emotional isolation at the top. The person feels alone with responsibility, image, and expectation. There are few safe places to express doubt or fear. Others may idealize or resent them, but rarely see them fully. This creates loneliness disguised as independence. The person may stop sharing struggles to avoid burdening others or appearing weak. Fear grows in silence. Without mirrors, anxiety distorts. The nervous system remains unregulated without co-regulation. Relationships feel unequal. Trust becomes difficult when power dynamics are present. The person may wonder who truly knows them. This isolation feeds paranoia because there is no grounding feedback. Healing requires finding spaces where status dissolves. Shared humanity restores balance. When the person is met as human rather than position, fear softens. Connection regulates what control cannot. Emotional safety reduces paranoia more effectively than vigilance ever could. Upper-class paranoia often expresses itself through control maintained by distance. The person learns that closeness can be risky, inviting scrutiny, expectation, or emotional obligation. Distance feels safer. Relationships are curated, interactions measured, access carefully limited. This creates an illusion of control. By keeping others at arm's length, the person believes they can manage outcomes and protect themselves from disappointment or exposure. Yet this distance slowly hardens into isolation. Fear thrives in separation. Without emotional closeness, misunderstandings multiply. The nervous system remains tense because connection, which regulates fear, is missing. Control becomes exhausting. The person may feel powerful yet lonely, respected yet unseen. Distance prevents harm, but also prevents nourishment. Paranoia grows because there are no trusted witnesses to reality. Every interaction feels strategic. Healing involves risking selective closeness. Control does not have to disappear, but it must soften. When boundaries allow warmth, fear decreases. Distance can protect, but connection stabilizes. When the person learns that closeness does not automatically lead to loss or exploitation, control loosens. Safety becomes relational rather than defensive. Paranoia fades when distance is no longer the primary shield and trust is allowed to develop slowly, imperfectly, but authentically. Upper-class paranoia deepens when identity becomes tightly bound to achievement. Success stops being something the person does and becomes who they are. Every accomplishment reinforces belonging. Every failure threatens exile. This creates constant internal pressure. The person feels watched by invisible standards. Rest feels undeserved. Stillness feels dangerous. Fear grows because achievement is never permanent. There is always someone advancing, outperforming, rising faster. Paranoia emerges as comparison and self-monitoring. The nervous system stays activated, braced for replacement. Joy in success is brief, because the next benchmark already looms. Relationships suffer as competition seeps into perception. Others become threats or mirrors rather than companions. Healing begins by separating worth from output. Achievement can matter without defining identity. When the person allows themselves to exist without proving value, fear softens. The body learns it will not disappear without performance. Paranoia loses power when identity becomes intrinsic rather than conditional. Success becomes expression instead of protection. Presence replaces pressure. The person can finally rest without fearing they are becoming irrelevant or invisible. Upper-class paranoia often centers on fear of exposure through failure. Failure feels unforgivable because it threatens the narrative of competence and control. The person believes mistakes will reveal inadequacy. Fear magnifies the consequences of being wrong. Small errors feel catastrophic. This creates perfectionism and avoidance. New risks are declined not because they lack value, but because they carry exposure. The nervous system equates failure with danger. Shame waits nearby. Others may seek confidence, but internally the person rehearses collapse scenarios. Paranoia grows as vigilance increases. Every decision feels loaded. Failure is imagined as public and permanent. Healing requires redefining failure as information rather than indictment. Growth demands missteps. When the person experiences failure without losing dignity or belonging, fear loosens. Exposure becomes survivable. The body learns that imperfection does not equal annihilation. Paranoia fades when failure is integrated into identity rather than hidden from it. Safety increases when the person trusts their capacity to recover. Resilience replaces fear. Failure becomes a passage, not a sentence, and the self remains intact on the other side. Upper-class paranoia often manifests as a persistent fear of being replaced. The person senses competition everywhere, even in neutral spaces. Someone younger, smarter, or more adaptable always seems close behind. This fear keeps the nervous system alert and comparative. Achievements no longer bring relief. They only postpone anxiety. The person may overwork, overprepare, and overextend to stay ahead. Relationships feel conditional, based on usefulness or relevance. Rest feels dangerous because it creates space for others to advance. Paranoia grows as identity becomes tied to exclusivity. Being needed feels safer than being valued. The person may secretly fear becoming obsolete. Healing begins by recognizing that worth is not a limited resource. Replacement is a concept rooted in scarcity, not humanity. When the person allows themselves to be valued beyond function, fear softens. Contribution can coexist with rest. Presence replaces competition. The body learns it does not need to outrun others to remain safe. Paranoia eases when identity expands beyond rank and comparison into connection and continuity. Upper-class paranoia often includes a deep distrust of ease. When life feels smooth, the person becomes suspicious. Calm feels like a prelude to disruption. The nervous system scans for what is being missed. Ease is interpreted as complacency. This belief prevents relaxation. Even pleasure carries tension. The person may sabotage moments of peace by introducing urgency or work. Paranoia thrives because the body never receives confirmation that safety can last. This pattern often originates in environments where stability was unpredictable. Wealth challenges the belief, but does not automatically resolve it. Ease must be practiced to become believable. Healing involves allowing comfort without punishment. When ease is tolerated repeatedly, fear loses its argument. The nervous system slowly learns that calm does not invite disaster. Wealth can support ease, but trust must be embodied. When ease becomes familiar rather than threatening, paranoia loosens and presence becomes possible without vigilance. Upper-class paranoia is sustained by constant image management. The person feels watched by social expectations, reputations, and unspoken standards. Every interaction feels performative. Words are filtered. Emotions are edited. Authentic reactions feel risky. This ongoing self-monitoring creates internal tension. The nervous system remains activated, braced for judgment. Paranoia grows because there is no private self. The person may feel exhausted without understanding why. Image management replaces genuine expression. Relationships feel shallow because nothing spontaneous is allowed. Healing requires reclaiming internal permission to exist without curation. Not every moment needs to be impressive. When the person allows themselves to be ordinary, pressure eases. Image loses its grip. Paranoia fades when the self no longer feels on display. Safety grows when authenticity is practiced in small, chosen spaces. The body relaxes when it no longer has to perform worthiness. Upper-class paranoia is not born from excess, but from fragility hidden beneath privilege. Across these patterns, a single truth emerges. Safety that depends on position, image, or advantage never fully settles in the body. The higher the perceived stakes, the sharper the fear of loss, exposure, and replacement becomes. Wealth and status can reduce certain risks while amplifying others, especially those tied to identity and belonging. Paranoia thrives where worth feels conditional and connection feels uncertain. It is not arrogance that drives this vigilance. It is fear of becoming irrelevant, unseen, or unsafe. Healing does not require rejecting success or dismantling comfort. It requires disentangling the self from hierarchy. When identity is rooted in humanity rather than rank, fear loosens its grip. Trust grows through genuine connection, not constant control. The nervous system relaxes when safety is felt internally and relationally, not performed or Upper-class paranoia dissolves slowly through authenticity, shared vulnerability, and the permission to be ordinary. When worth no longer rises and falls with status, presence replaces vigilance. Life becomes lived rather than managed. Security becomes something experienced, not guarded, and fear finally loses its authority over the inner world.